Hi, this is Gary Snow from Daiku Games. As a game designer, you're often dipping into items that have inspired you. One such item is the fabulous fantasy quest book called Tasks of Tantalon, written by Steve Jackson of the Games Workshop and the Fighting Fantasy fame. And it was illustrated by Stephen Lavis, who is also known for doing illustrations for the Chronicles of Narnia. I wanted to do this flip through of Tasks of Tantalon to kind of showcase the really good design, review the puzzles within the book, and spoiler alert, after I go through the book the first time, I'll also go through the solution part of it. So you've been warned. I'll warn you again before that happens, but just wanted to give you a little bit of background before I started the review of Tasks of Tantalon. It was first published by Puffin Books in association with Oxford University Press in 1985. At the time, as you can see on the back here, the UK price was approximately £3, and in Canada, where I live, it was $5. So it's always amazing to see how much things cost. If you go on eBay right now, you can get a copy for about $50 US. I think there's 3 or 4 on there right now. So really good bang for your buck still at this point, because it's one of those, for me, watershed pieces that really inspires me an awful lot. So the first time that I got this was as a Christmas present in 1985 from my sister, and I was just starting to play Dungeons and Dragons. So by far, it's been one of the most enduring presents that I've received, and I really have to maybe admit now that when I saw that it was by Steve Jackson, growing up playing Car Wars, which you could actually see in a previous review where I reviewed Car Wars, Steve Jackson was in Austin, Texas, and the U.S. Designer of GURPS fame. But Steve Jackson in the U.K., he was famous for the fighting fantasy choose your own adventure books, along with Ian Livingstone. And so I mistakenly thought it was the same Steve Jackson for a number of years, and I know that's quite a common mistake. So my apologies for thinking that for so long, but Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone wrote the Fighting Fantasy books in 1982, I believe. They started with Warlock of Firetop Mountain was their first one, and they really grounded a lot of people in tabletop role-playing games through those Fighting Fantasy books. And if you read the comment sections of a lot of forums talking about them, they were a real gateway, especially to the Games Workshop, where Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone plied their trade. And also on a side note, I just recently saw that there's a book that's being crowdfunded that's featuring the early days of the Games Workshop, and I'll put a link below in the description. And just, I guess, one final note of Stephen Lavis is that he actually got into doing modern kind of mid-century art after this, even though he still has a strong following from his 1980s fantasy illustrations and paintings that he's been kind of known for. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into Tasks of Tantalon, give a bit of a review of it and the puzzles and why I think it's such a great and inspiring book. And the other thing I'll do is just be warned that this is a 35-year-old book, so I'm going to be pretty gentle with it because I do not want to see it ruined. But I'm going to start by reading the back of it. Tasks of Tantalon. Can you unravel the clues and solve the sorcerer's grand quest? The land of Galanteria, and here's another kind of funny thing. As a young kid, I always thought it was Galantria. I just kind of like melded those words together. So if I flub up throughout this review, you know it's Galanteria. The land of Galanteria is reeling from the aftermath of a long and costly war. Tantalon, wizard of the court, rules the kingdom over an inner council of scheming knights, jealously vying for power. But Tantalon's years are drawing to a close. In order to seek out the kingdom's sharpest minds, Tantalon has devised an epic adventure quest, one which will test the wits of contestants to the full. From near and far, contenders come in to Royal Lendal to take up the challenge.
You are a competitor in the Aging Sorcerer's Grand Quest. Can you steal the Brimstone Dragon's treasure hoard? Will you find a way to free Sir Dunstable from the imprisonment in the Stinn dungeon? And how will you catch the demon fish? All the information you need is there, ingeniously hidden in both text and pictures. And each strand of the mystery unravels to reveal the next. But you are sharp enough to crack it. But are you sharp enough to crack it? Can you complete the task that you have been set? The tasks of Tantalon await you. Do you dare take up the challenge? So that's the hook. You can see Tantalon there, a number of the puzzles highlighted there. Great cover art by Stephen Lavis. This is where I'm going to be gentle, and you can see the front cover, the banner. Now I can kind of press it a little bit more open. So I won't go into reading it, but basically it sets out that there is a war with the kingdom, and it's really strained the kingdom, and they finally reached a peace treaty, but it's come at a cost. And so they're low on funds. A lot of things have been left unsettled within the kingdom. And so Tantalon, realizing this and knowing that he's aging, he cannot become the king, even though everybody wants him to. And so he's devised this plan to come up with somebody that can complete these quests, because only those that can complete the quests would be able to achieve the greatness and rule the kingdom. So it kind of sets it up. It's like a Hercules task environment. They give a lot of the overview of some of the quests that you're going to be going on. And spoiler alert, there's some planted items throughout the book. And just like you see in movies, when they introduce something at the beginning of a movie and then it ends up being a vital piece of the movie at the end, or a book, any fiction piece, that's kind of throughout this whole book. There's little clues planted, and the payoff is later on. So we go through more of the stories, and then finally, can you succeed in Galantaria's greatest contest? Have you the valor, the wisdom, the determination to succeed in an adventure quest, which has become known as the Tasks of Tantalon? So I really always liked this kind of style. And for me, even though I love the OSR aesthetic in the early days of Dungeons and Dragons, when this came out, and I had seen some of the Hildebrandt brothers illustrations for Lord of the Rings, this was kind of what I always envisioned for Dungeons and Dragons. So the first quest that you go on is to release Sir Dunstable of Aiken, as he has been taken captive. So what ends up being the design of it is, if you look in this corner, there's a lever that can go from either 1 or 5. And then based upon which way you turn it, if you turn the lever to 5, it pulls the pulley or the rope. And then you have to wind your way through the illustration, and then you can see it flows on to the next page. And there's some trickier points of it. A lot of this is pretty much you just follow the lever and how the pulley turns. However, you start to get into some of the three-dimensional aspects of it here, where you turn the wheel and then this spins and it turns on a 90-degree angle. So you have to do a little bit of trickiness following it. And then it comes over here. And from there, the pulley goes up and then back down. And once again, it does a couple more 90-degree turns. So you have to kind of know your three-dimensional spaces. And then it finally comes up here and spins through these pulleys. And then you have to decide whether you raise the rope or lower the rope. So that's the first puzzle within the book. The second puzzle was after you get through that initial boat ride and you save the Sir Dunstable, you have to figure out how to catch the demon fish, because none of the fishery folks are willing to go out, because every time they go out, the demon fish catches them. So you have to go through and figure out how best to catch the demon fish. And there's obviously some puzzles throughout there with the demon fish and various other fish that you might come across. Some great artwork. Knights riding lobsters, very, very creative. The third quest is to go to the town of Weirtown and arrest or find the Hag Witch. And so at the end of it, you have to say, how many Hag Witches can you see? And I should, if it's not obvious already, the solution to all of these is the numbers. So, and you'll see different numbers and runes around, and so numbers play prominently across the book. And here you had to say how many copper pieces will you spend. And the question is, sorry to go back on this, but the minnows will cost you 3 copper pieces, worms will cost you 2 copper pieces, flies or meat will be more expensive at 6 and 7 copper pieces respectively. So going here, back to Weirtown and the Hag Witch, is you have to count the number of witches that you see. So I don't want to do any spoilers here yet, but I will give you some hints that there's a few tricks here, that there's a hand that's kind of got no body attached to it, and then there's some differences that you'll see in some of the Hag Witches for when you spot them. And then you move on to the River Ede, and the engineers are having trouble figuring out which valves to turn off or deducing which valves are open. So you go through the open valves, and you have to trace them back to figure out which of the valves are open. And then each valve has a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that determines, based upon the flow, and it's not an exact match to the 8 there, you have to figure out which ones are flowing and which ones to turn off. So what is the sum of the open valves? And then you get to the Brimstone Dragon, and you have to determine how many gold pieces are in the dragon's hoard. And then that will be the answer to this one. So you go to the Brimstone Dragon's lair, and then it's as simple as you counting up the number of gold coins, which is a pretty tedious task. And I don't know if you're the same way, but you can get easily lost when trying to find it. And then the next quest is you have to set the Princes of Ham free, and they've been turned into frogs. And so there's 4 toads that are guarding their escape, and there's 4 princes that are trying to get past the frogs. However, the problem is that you can only move forward, and if you move forward, you can also leave a space that the toads will automatically fill. So if you go back to some of the interviews with Steve Jackson, he mentioned that this was a very common pub riddle that he had come across or seen over time. And he thought, why don't I incorporate that kind of puzzle into the game? So at the end, it asks, how many hops in total will the princes have to make in order to exactly change positions with the horned toads? The next quest is you have to get the Regent's Jewel in the Minotaur Maze. And so in here, the question is, which one should you take? The route 3, the route 2, the route, 7, or the route 5? And so from here, you follow the maze to see if you can make it through from the 2 and the 3. And ultimately, you want to get to the jewel inside. Moving on to the next quest, it's asking you to seek out the Ting Ring as it's been hidden in the picture here. So if you are able to find the Ting ring, you'll be able to answer this question: how many stones are set in the ring? And so you have to search the entire picture. And I always love these little goblin guys, kind of tucked away here, hidden away. And then there's a map that also kind of informs you of the world that Galanteria exists in. Then you move on to the next quest, where Tag has stolen some items from the kingdom and escaped, and you have to find out where King Tag is hiding. So if you can deduce where King Tag is hiding, you read off the north, south, east, west coordinates of his refuge and add them all together. So if you look on the page here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and vice versa on the other coordinates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's enough clues here to give you an idea of where King Tag is hiding, and then you have to determine, as an example, if it was at 3 and 6, that would be a total of 9 if he was hiding in this location. And there's some, as I said, kind of clues that we'll go over in the solution part of this. The next quest, you can see my thread in the binding coming loose a little bit, is the golden cross from Hornhelm's crown must be returned to Foreign Town. And so in this one, you're given the map and a picture on this side, and it asks you, if you can locate the treasure, you will be able to answer this question: how many trees grow next to the tallest tree on Windswept Moor? So I'm going to actually read this one out rather than, because it's a little bit smaller. From the tallest tree on the Windswept Moor, walk towards the nearest path. Follow it to the right until you reach a bridge. Walk upstream until 2 buildings are directly in line. Turn eastward and continue until you reach the path. Halfway between this point and the nearest building, dig under a bush. So the idea behind it is, if you can locate the treasure, you will be able to answer this question: how many trees grow next to the tallest tree on Windswept Moor? So the trouble with this one is you have to figure out which way is east, and you also have to figure out which way is upstream. So there's some clues here that we'll go over in the solution part of the game. In this one, it's fairly simple that Cassandra is locked inside a prison tower at Cumbleside, and you have to figure out which key will unlock it. So you can see there, if you zoom in, the actual locking mechanism. And within the locking mechanism, there's some keys that could fit within the lock, and you have to determine which key it is, and each of these key sets has a number on it, and that will be identify the correct key by its number. And there's another key hidden around. The next quest is that Sir Duke, due to his kind nature, was tricked by Medusa, who was posing as a beggar woman. So as he bent down to give her some gold coins, he was turned to stone after Medusa revealed herself. And you have to figure out which statue is Sir Duke so that you can turn him back and give him the antidote. So which statue will you choose? What is the number? So you have the statue with the number 17, 14. Some of them are kind of cut off. Kind of makes you wonder. And then you are able to determine the number and move on to the next quest. And then you finally get to the end. You return to the court triumphantly, ready to announce your success. But have you not heard? Tantalon has died. So you have a heavy heart. But before he died, he said he entrusted you with a small casket, and whoever should return from this casket, that he will give you the contents. And at that point, with the 12 tasks completed, there will be a bunch of runes that you have to go through to determine if you had the right answers. and then finally the end. So I thought it was a very interesting book. As a kid, it captured my imagination, and I thought it's one of those books that is very inspiring to me. And what I really like about it is the ability to have a puzzle within the game. It's along the similar concept of this book here called The Masquerade, The Treasure Hunt of the Century. Now, I only stumbled across this recently because I kind of have this love of these types of kind of puzzle games that are actually very interactive and real world. And in The Masquerade, Kit Williams, who was a painter, he essentially created a real life treasure hunt, and years in the making, and he hid a prize here and he buried it somewhere in England. And apparently in 1976, this was quite a treasure hunt. And the reason I find Tasks of Tantalon and things like this very inspiring is I'm working on a setting called The City's Grim, and it might end up biting me in the butt as far as it's complicated, right? Like, you just can't design something. You have to actually really provide some foresight into where you're designing. But the Easter eggs and the puzzles within the book is something I've always wanted to do from Tasks of Tantalon. So I know The City's Grim, the game that I'm working on, that we're set to go in Kickstarter in the second half of 2021, is that I'm going to have a lot of this type of puzzle work within the game itself. So even if you are kind of waffling on the setting, or maybe you go, not quite ready to jump in with the rules, or whatever the case, at least if you have the book, it's going to be a bit of a puzzle and interesting for you. So before I get into the solutions, I'm actually going to also pitch the other thing that I'm working on, which is the Daiku dungeon rules in the system that I'm going to be using for the City's Grim. So I just wanted to give you just a quick overview of what I've been working on. So quick rules here. All the rules basically fit on this page. The idea behind it was that the rules are so simple, they can basically be IKEA instructions. So I took that to heart and have designed a bit of a theme around everything with IKEA adventurers. So there's monsters and everything all in the IKEA theme, which you can find at daikugames.com. And I don't want to get into the details of it. I just want to give you a high overview of kind of what's happening. And with that said, I've also designed the initial fantasy adventure called The Eye of Kia. Play on words there. I don't know if that's funny or not, but anyways, I kind of thought it was. And the idea behind it is, and I'll read this, a great darkness, and here is where you'll probably see me riffing a little bit on the Tasks of Tantalon. A great darkness has befallen the realm as the powerful Eye of Kia has been stolen from the king's throne. The suspected thief is the former court wizard Zelek, who has been banished for practicing the dark arts. Zelek has since been spotted commanding goblins near the Crypt of Mirrors in the northern reaches. With the loss of the eye, the kingdom is now defenseless against the orc army gathering on the border. A call has been sent out to all those brave of heart to return the eye and save the kingdom from impending doom. Will your party of adventurers be successful in the quest for the Eye of Kia? So, I created a little eye, and with the eye Kia, and the crypt entrance is the first part of it, and I'm kind of excited by it. I haven't seen it before, so maybe it's been done before, but I was kind of thinking that I wanted to do something where there were some platforms, and the characters could end up using some of the remnants of an old bridge system that was in place to do some pole vaulting, or perhaps they do other things to get across. And so there's a lot of varieties in the different platforms, and I don't want to spoil it for any adventurers, but I hope that it's an exciting start to get into the adventure of the Eye of Kia and the crypt entrance, the Crypt of Mirrors, because every IKEA store's got Lots of mirrors, correct? Okay, so this is the spoiler warning once again. If you want to buy this book and go through it yourself, you can stop watching and get back here. Now, finding the solution for me was like years journey as far as I figured out kind of where the solution was hidden in the book, but I didn't think I had the right answers. So for me, I was very hesitant to ever kind of get into looking at it too closely because I was afraid of ruining the surprise for me. I don't know if you're one of those people, but for me, the Christmas was more exciting leading up to it than actually getting the present. So I never really wanted to ruin any of my surprises. So, okay, let's get into the solutions. Let's get to the first one. So I can't animate this very well, but the simple answer is that you need to move the lever to the position 5, and by pulling the lever that way to 5, it pulls the rope, and if you go through all the mechanisms, it raises Sir Dunstable. So it's a 50-50 chance really there. Now the demon fish, this one also kind of has a simple explanation. So if you look at the demon fish, he is eating the orange fish there. And if you look throughout the rest of the picture, you can see the orange fish here. So in order to catch the demon fish, you need the orange fish. And what is the orange fish eating? Well, he's eating the fish with the orange speck on his gills. And if you look around the rest of the picture, you'll see that there is another orange fish up here that is got the orange speck on his gills, and he is eating a fish with the black line near its tail fins. And if you look around the rest of the picture, you'll see the fish with the black lines near its tail fin eating a minnow. And then you go, well, maybe that's done. Is there another minnow eating anything? And the only other place that there's a minnow is actually on the flag that the penguin in the knight's helmet is holding, and that minnow is eating a fly. So, going back to the question of the copper pieces, how much do you want to spend? Minnows will cost you 3, worms will cost you 2, flies will be more expensive at 6 or 7 copper pieces respectively. So the copper pieces is for the fly at 6 copper pieces. The next solution is the hag witch. So if you go along here and you start counting them out, and you look over on this side of the page, you've got 1, you've got 2, you've got 3. This one's tucked away here next to in the window. You got 4, you've got 5, you've got 6, you've got 7, 8. Looks like 1 but isn't. You got 9, and you can see the ring on her hand. And you've got 10, 11, 12. And then this is a bit of a trick because she's actually only got 3 teeth and not the 4 like the other ones. But then you have the hand that doesn't have the body, and so that is 13. So you have 13 hag witches. So the answer is 13. The next one, I'm not going to bore you with going through there. But if you do follow up all the different aspects of which valves are open, you have valves 3, 4, and 7 open. So if you add those up, you get the total of 14 to close off the open valves. So 3, 4, and 7 are open. This one here is also a bit of a chore. As I mentioned, you start going through and you count all the gold coins and you add up to 102. When I was first doing this, the trick to me was, does this count? Because the dwarf is holding, or the gnome is holding the gold coin, so does that count? And it does, so 102 to get to the answer. The next one is the how many jumps does it take? How many jumps do the princes have to take to get them to set free? So I'm going to attempt this. I worked up a bit of a mock-up here. So similar to what you would see on up above, you've got the 9 spaces. You've got the toads on the right and the princes over there. So to get through this quest, you can move forward 1, and then if you leave the space occupied, the toads will automatically jump. So if the toads jump there, and the prince doesn't move, and the toad moves forward, it kind of sets you up to do the pattern to get them through. So then the prince can jump there, there. That's 3 jumps so far, and then 4. And then the toads, if left, will move forward. And then you go 5, 6, 7, 8. Nine, 10, 11, 12. So 12 moves, and you can get the princes and the toads to exchange positions. The Minotaur maze, when you go through it, there's actually a couple solutions. So then it kind of hints at here. You have to also check out the globes. Let's see if I can find it within the text. The orbs of Shantos. They're in a blue crystal, and that will help assist you in finding out which path to take. So once again, you've got 3, 2, 7, and 5, and I think there's 2 paths that can actually get you through there are by path 3 and 5. If I were to go through that, so 2 of them can give you the center, but if you go back a page and you look at the Orb of Shantos, you've got the 3 here. You've got the 4 there. The 5 is missing. And then there's the 6, but the 5 is hidden up there. So a little bit of a gray area, but the 5 is the answer to how to get you through the maze. So how many stars mark the entrance of the safe route, which is 5. If you follow it through and you take the clues of the Orb of Shantos. The next quest was to seek out the Ting Ring and find out how many stones are set in the Ting Ring. So I'll maybe zoom in here a little bit, but if you look around, there's all sorts of different places, but none of the areas really jump out as a ring, and you look on his hand and a few other things. So if you look way down on the Bunsen burner holder, you can see that there are these holes where you can put your test tubes. One of them is actually a ring sitting on the test tubes that's made to look like one of the holes. So in fact, the ring here only has 0 stones, so there are actually no stones in the Ting Ring. This one, I have to admit, was the one that really stumped me. Growing up, like I said, I never really wanted to know the answers until like later in life. I held on to the book, but once I figured it all out, there's a few kind of ideas that you could look at it. So if you look at the sign, there's a tag, or a gat, as it says. And so you start to wonder, what does that mean within the sign? The other thing is that there was King Tag was off to meet his wife, who was ill at the time. And so you wonder if the healing well has anything to do with where they're located. The other thing was he has the French fleur-de-lis, and the gate is very similar to the Arc de Triomphe, so that was a bit of a confusing thing for me. I thought between tag or gat and the card's gate and the fleur-de-lis, a lot of this stuff kind of played into what I thought the solution was. However, if you go into the actual solution and trying to find out where they are in the rendezvous point, the fleeing King Tag meets his Queen Davina and then heads south to the Bishop of Eacham, who escorts them to Sir Niebling, the Knight of Eacham. And then if you follow that sequence as it's described in the text, it goes king, queen, bishop, knight, castle. And so it's very much like a chessboard. And then with that, it's the King's Gambit. So everybody that's watched that show on Netflix, you can imagine at Gambit Castle, that's where everything is located. So if you follow that logic, and then the answer is 1 out of the top and 5 out of this row going 1 to 7. So 1 and 5, the answer is 6. This one was also a bit of a confusing one, at least I thought it was, for a variety of reasons, because it says when you arrive on the next morning, you arrive at Windswept Moor, can you locate Hornhelm's treasure? And when you arrive, the sun is facing you, so that's in the east. And so that is supposed to be the sun, but maybe in England that's you can tell the difference, but in Canada we have a bit more bluebird skies, and I would expect to see the sun, so that was a bit confusing. But you can also see the flow of the river underneath the bridge, and if you look at this keep and the stone here, and if you look on the map, that's the equivalent of coming this way from the top side of this map, because you can see the stone and the tower. And then through deduction, in trying to line different things up, ultimately the answer is this stand of trees here. And so that's the tallest tree. And then there's 4 next to it with the Windswept Moor, because you go through the process of having this be the bush. So once again, if I read that again, you walk towards the nearest path from the tallest tree on Windswept Moor. You follow it to the right until you reach a bridge. You turn upstream until 2 buildings are directly in line, and then turn eastwards and continue until you reach a path. Halfway between the point and the nearest building, dig under a bush. So a little bit, I always thought it was a little bit of a confusing one, and maybe not exactly explicit, but that is the answer to it. And then I think we got a couple more. To release Cassandra, this is where I mentioned earlier in the review that there's the plant and then the payoff. So if you go through all these keys and you kind of use your 3D mindset and you try to find ones that fit there, and there's keys here on the side and there's some hidden here and there's one hidden here. If you go back to early on in Sir Dunstable, when he's being lowered into the pit, and you look in this set of keys, they also have numbers. And the answer is number 15 from this set of keys. So if you look on here, and if you look at the actual design of the lock mechanism, number 15 is the actual answer to the keys. Catch us back up here. So with the number 15, you free Cassandra. And then once again, you have a plant and a payoff, because earlier in the book, they talk about Sir Duke being bearded and having a twin brother. And if you look at all the different pictures here, and once again, sorry to flip back here, if you go to it mentioned Sir Duke going to Weirtown. So there's two people in the pictures that are the same. The man on the horse, the knight on the horse, and this man here with his cloak and beard. And it does mention that Sir Duke is bearded. So therefore, if you can rule out the man on the horse, which is also here, Sir Duke is here with his axe, and number 14. So then it once again prompts you to do a rune search, the rune trail, and then you will complete the Tasks of Tantalon. So when I was younger, I don't know how long it took me to kind of realize this, but if you look closely at the runes, and I was in elementary school, so I'll forgive myself a little bit. But if you look through the runes of the book, and you'll see here, and I'm going to get my macro lens out for the benefit of the viewers, but if you look here in 196, there's a little line here, and I'll zoom in on there with my macro lens, and there's some text. And basically, that starts your hunt of what the text says, basically confirming all of your answers. And so it'll ask you of the questions, basically making sure that you know the answer and then deduce the same number from another solution from the quest in order to finally go through all the runes. And there's more runes that have the small print, and you really need a magnifying glass to see it. And a lot of the times it's very difficult to read in the first place, even with the magnifying glass. And then eventually, on the final page, as you go through all the runes and find the small print, pretenders and fools will end their quest here. Only a true champion will reach the ultimate goal. And on the back page in plain sight, if you look here under the crown, there's some more small print saying, here is actually, if you have done it properly, you'll have received your crown and you are the new king of Galanteria. So once again, I suggest if you can get one of these and try it out prior to watching the second half of this video, and come back and watch, and you can get maybe one on eBay or a used bookstore. But hats off to Steve Jackson and Stephen Lavis for, I think, putting together like a really good book. And if you read the solution PDF, which he put out years later because he had so many people contacting him going, I can't figure this thing out. And he did provide some of the solutions. So some of those gray area ones that I kind of put off looking into, like the map with the tallest tree and everything, he explains it. And the collaboration between the two of them was kind of interesting to read about. And so once again, love this kind of concept of having Easter eggs or puzzles within a book. And the game that I'm working on, The Cities Grim, is going to be full of these. And so even if maybe the setting is not always 100% to your liking, I think there's going to be enough interesting items within the design of the book itself that it'll keep you occupied. So that's going to be it for me. Once again, Tasks of Tantalon by Steve Jackson and Stephen Lavis. Check it out. And if you haven't seen the Cities Grim write-up, or the Daiku dungeon system that we're working on, please go to daikugames.com. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on social media at Daiku Games. You can find us pretty easily. We're on Reddit. We're on a lot of different platforms, Instagram, Twitter. So feel free to reach out, and we'll see you in the near future. Talk to you later. Bye.